Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, I want to talk about the psychology of attraction. What can drive someone to notice you? Could be a woman, it could be a man. We're going to talk about a little more specifically regarding a woman, but you can just use if you're going to see that the examples are not necessarily specific to what drives a woman to notice you, but we will use that more so as an example, but you can just flip it, okay? The first one is sexual dimorphism. I believe that most people are not shocked about this because that is why we evolved the way we do and why there are so many distinct features for men and for women. And today we're actually going to look at, for this particular point, is a study that was published in 2009. The strength of your particular masculine characteristics or feminine characteristics if you're a woman, right? But for men, your masculine characteristics actually does increase your chance of attracting somebody. This is obvious, but if I didn't put it in, I feel like that would be misrepresentation of the truth. And so, what are these particular masculine characteristics? Well, this research actually did cite strong brows and a jawline and um, wider shoulders in comparison to the waistline. Okay. And then for women, particularly, it's going to be a curvature of particular body parts. And for men, we can actually see that having a very extreme case of this typically is it's not the sweet spot of attraction. It's actually moderate, right? And this is the same with women. If you have a very, very strong accentuations, a lot of times that is a little too much. Moderate is usually the balance. Moderate, and depending on the characteristics, even a little bit less than moderate. But usually it's going to be where it has some sort of balance. And actually, that's why the next point is also very important. This is the same research, 2009, and it cited facial symmetry. It doesn't have to be perfect. Most faces are not. I think almost all faces do not have perfect symmetry, but we do see that some symmetry or overall symmetry is incredibly attractive. In fact, this is one of the most significant points that drives attraction regarding not just short-term relationships, but long-term relationships and commitment. Often, we also see that individuals who have similar percentages of symmetry tend to be in relationships with each other. That's an interesting characteristic. Not all the time is it the case, but we do see it more common than not. If you want to see more exclusive videos with me, more psychological content, more dating content, I post minimum of 5 exclusive videos on our group, and other people post things as well. We post a lot of things, and I think a lot of you would like it. It's a space with a lot of people that have like-minded, like most everybody in the group is very similar to one another, and they can learn from one another. And so if you guys are interested in that, that is pinned in the comments. The next one is actually very interesting. This study in 2008 showed that women particularly find it appealing that men have stable income, okay? A lot of women actually even verbalized and said high income. However, we did see that there was a difference between what women say versus what they actually commit to. And this is with men too, but men in particular, they don't have a strong preference about income. Men do have a sometimes difference between what they say versus what they commit to, but income was definitely not one of them. But with women, it is. So stable income actually is the one that women tend to actually be more drawn to rather than high income. And stable income, more particularly, it could be because stable income is more common than high income. That was what I thought about actually when I read this. But stable income just means that you don't have too many periods of unemployment. This was based on 2008 study, okay? The next one is very interesting. Open posture. Okay, open posture. But it's basically the subconscious message that it communicates, in short, confidence. But this study in 2016 that was published was about speed dating. And so this is actually interesting because this can show how quickly this subconscious messaging really attracts women and men as well, but we're going to talk about the differences as well. The speed dating was a study that it was a controlled experiment, and we used dating as the application of psychology to basically see that people that display more expansive body posture, men in particular, were perceived more romantically desirable, more attractive, and more for short-term relationships, hookups, right? Okay. So what did the research cite as to be why? This is partly because for males, expansive posture communicates dominance and openness. So basically, the man who appears comfortable he's comfortable in his own body, but that's not the main thing. He's comfortable occupying space. interesting enough, which signifies that he's a leader, that he is able to, sometimes people can perceive it as good conflict resolution, because sometimes the man that occupies space, he may rub other men a type of way, but he's not afraid of that. And he may feel that he can resolve that. And so this conflict resolution aspect is very important in long-term relationships. The dominance is very good for short-term and long-term. So taking up space, really literally physically taking up space, okay? With women, it actually shows that a little less fidgety can give the similar effect, but it wasn't too detailed in the research actually. Okay, the next one is warmth and competence are fundamental for social judgment, particularly in relationship context, okay? So a study in 2002 actually developed a stereotype model testing these two variables we just talked about, warmth and competence. We're just seeing the dimensions of the social perception, I guess is a better way to put it, with the two variables we just discussed. And so what basically we see is that those two variables are fundamental with people choosing the relationship. However, it is not the first thing that shows up. Actually, physical attraction is one of the first things that show up regarding the first impressions in those 5 seconds. However, afterwards, continuing that relationship may be regarding these two aspects, competence and warmth. And sometimes they may compete with one another, which I've talked about in another video, where sometimes people may assume because you're competent, you're not as warm, or you may be intimidating, particularly with men. And so you may have to build more stronger rapport regarding that particular variable. But I find this very interesting because what it seems is women and men find that those two aspects make them feel more safe to actually pursue the relationship. And so you may have a situation where a lot of times you may have more short-term relationships and you may wonder why it's not turning into a long-term relationship. Compatibility is very important, and I'll make another video on that as well. But a lot of times you might be physically attractive, but you might not have reached the rapport regarding warmth and competence. And so if you are someone who might be particularly intimidating as a male, it may be beneficial to lead a little bit more with warmth, because the intimidation factor can sometimes shut people off from getting to know you more deeply, okay? The next one is actually similarity, and this is a little bit more with compatibility, but not all the time. I'm going to talk about it because this research was it was a review in 2008, and actually I believe the sample size was around 400. My note had an approximate, so I didn't write the exact number. So I wish I did. And then it shows that there was 313 investigations. Okay, that number I did write specifically. However, what we found is that individuals who have significant association between how they find each other similar, the perceived and actual similarity was really close too. I think it was it was close. It really was. And what we did see is that the perceived similarity actually remains the most predictive to establish relationships, not the actual similarity, but the perceived similarity. And that's likely because as time goes on, the similarity can be adjusted through the relationship. But I think this is really interesting because we also saw in a later study in 2013 that we found that the similarity was based on how much information they had. And so the best way to put it is if you have some traits that are similar to another person, lead with those traits, because that will be what drives people to notice you. Example, if you two both are in tech, for example, you can lead with that, and that will heighten the chances of someone finding you attractive. I think that's really interesting. Even if other aspects are not entirely as similar, if you lead with those things, it really does help, okay? And the last one is intelligence. This is really particular to males, as in intelligent men are more attractive. For women, it's not as significant. What we see is this research in 2009 basically investigated male intelligence and showed that not only do women say they like intelligent men, they actually tend to commit to men that are actually intelligent. Not just perceive, but are intelligent, which I find interesting. But a lot of times women perceive this through conversation skills, humor, problem solving, and knowledge. And so if you are a man who is you are intelligent, but you don't like to show it, lead with that a little bit. You will be surprised how much this changes. And so the research is going to be in the description box. If you guys need me for any calls or anything particular, that is pinned in the comments. And I hope this video is helpful. I'll see you next time.